Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Mitchell, and I'm a marketing communications manager with the Lighthouse Lab Services marketing team. Lighthouse offers a wide range of services to support medical laboratories, and one of the things we frequently assist with is helping new lab owners complete the necessary paperwork to compliantly operate their businesses. To do that, all labs, regardless of the type or complexity of the type of test that they intend to perform, will need to file a CLIA application using a CMS-116 form. We understand that could potentially be a daunting process for someone just entering the lab industry or maybe who has never personally owned their own testing business before. But fortunately, today I have with us Dr. Melissa Bell. She'll be joining me to walk through the process and make sure that you can complete your CLIA application efficiently and compliantly. Dr. Bell is a doctor of clinical laboratory science and serves as both a technical supervisor and part-time laboratory director for Lighthouse. So we're really thrilled to have some of her time today and get her expertise. Before you dive in, Dr. Bell, I just want to clarify that while we'll be talking today about filing for a new laboratory, there are some other instances when an existing lab might need to amend this application, such as changes to their test menu or lab director. Is there anything I'm missing there?
That's correct, Alice. So if you are also maybe changing locations, that does come up quite often. You would fill out this form as well.
Okay, well, great. So yeah, if you ever need help amending your existing CLIA application, we help with that as well. But today we're going to just kind of be diving in from the perspective of a new lab owner. So go ahead and we're going to be starting with section one here, general information. And Dr. Bell, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Alex. So, yes, when you first start filling out this form, you're going to want to start in section one. For new laboratory owners, this is going to be your initial application. So, that first box under general information, you would check initial application. Anticipated start date, that is going to be the date where you're going to go live with testing. So, you're actually going to start patient testing. You're gonna work through this. You're gonna wanna put your facility name on here and your federal tax ID number. One thing I do wanna point out is when you do put your facility name on there, you wanna put the name that is associated with your tax ID number. So those should be identical. I do know that there are labs out there that operate under DBAs. You don't want to necessarily list the DBA. You want to list exactly what goes with that federal tax ID number because they do need to match up. Um, so that's important to point out. Your CLIA identification number for a new laboratory, you're not going to have one of those. This is the paperwork to file to actually obtain that CLIA identification number. I do want to point out if you were using this form to, change your certificate type or change your laboratory director, or even change your location, that's when you would fill in that portion right there. But for the purposes of this initial form, you will not have that. The next thing you're going to want to fill out is you're going to want to fill out your facility address, telephone, fax number, mailing address. The facility address needs to be the exact address that the laboratory is located at. And the reason for this is because when CLIA comes to either do those initial inspections or they do a drop-in inspection, they're going to want to go to the physical location of the laboratory. So it is important that you list that on there. It is okay if you have a different mailing or billing address for a CLIA laboratory, but for on the left-hand side where it says facility, you want it to be the physical location. There is a box up there for email address where you can receive notifications for electronic certificate and basically changes, updates. They will contact you through email. That's the best way to do this. And so you want the email address listed there to be of somebody who's going to be able to relay information. They will notify you about surveys through that email address. And so whoever's monitoring those email addresses, you want them to be able to communicate with the laboratory staff. The fee coupons and certificate, you're going to want to check where you want those to go. So it's important to fill out that as well. And then the last thing you're going to fill out is you're going to fill out the name of your laboratory director. You're going to want to have their full name, their last name, their first name, and their middle initial. You're going to want to have a good contact phone number for them that you're going to put into the laboratory director phone number box. And then you're going to put on there their credentials. Now, credentials may vary depending on what kind of laboratory you are setting up, whether it be a moderate complexity laboratory or a high complexity laboratory. So you're going to want to double check those credentials. If you need any help with that, Lighthouse is always ready to help you figure out if your laboratory director meets those requirements. And one of the things that I will say is that the requirements for laboratory directors was just updated in December of 2024. So some of the criteria has changed. So you're going to want to review your laboratory director and the credential that they hold to make sure that you meet the requirements for CLIA. For high complexity laboratories, they need to be board certified. They need to have a doctorate degree. And they also need to have an experience verification form, which is something new that came in with the new regulatory requirements. So you're just going to want to go through those. You're going to want to collect all of that information. And that information should be submitted with your CMS-116, which is this form here. CLIA is going to want to see that, and they're going to want to review those credentials. For a moderate complexity lab, you're going to want to have somebody with a bachelor's degree, preferably in lab sciences or biology or chemistry. Those credentials are also laid out for the new regulatory requirements as well, and you're going to need to submit those credentials when you submit this form.
Thanks for calling out those updates specifically on the lab director requirements, Melissa. We got a lot of questions on that last December when those went into effect, and we're continuing to receive a lot of clarifications and different things. So if that's something you ever need assistance with, we do help with staffing with both full and part-time lab directors, and could certainly make sure that those individuals meet all the new qualifications. And I just want to call out as well, since you're going to be hearing a lot of Dr. Bell's voice walking through this form today, I'll give her a little break. This form was updated last year in 2024. Only minor changes from what you may have previously seen, but that is part of the reason why we're going back and recreating this video resource today, just to call out any additional changes or clarifications that may have taken place in the last few years. And with that, Dr. Bell, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you for section 2 here.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So in section 2, we're looking at the type of certificate that you are trying to obtain for your laboratory. There are several different kinds. You have a certificate of waiver. You have a certificate for provider-performed microscopy. You have a certificate of compliance, and you have a certificate of accreditation. I'm going to go through each one of these. A certificate of waiver is for those laboratories who are performing those point-of-care testing. Your streps, your flus, your rapid COVIDs. It's pretty basic, and those are the tests that would require a certificate of waiver. A certificate for provider-performed microscopy. These are procedures that are usually done in physician offices where they're using a microscope to obtain patient test results. And those are for physicians who are doing just their own basic testing in their in-house office. A certificate of compliance, which is what most CLIA accredited laboratories have, is where you either do moderate complexity testing or high complexity testing, and you want to be accredited by CLIA. So that's what a certificate of compliance is. A certificate of accreditation is for moderate complexity labs and high complexity labs, and you can be accredited by the Joint Commission, CAP, COLA, ACHC, AABB, ASHI, or A2LA. Those are the different accrediting bodies that will oversee laboratories. And I know some people ask, well, if I want to be accredited by a different laboratory agency, why do I have to have a CLIA number or a CLIA certificate? It is a regulation that you obtain both. You apply, you get your CLIA number But basically, if you are applying for a certificate of accreditation, you're telling CLIA, I need my CLIA number, but I'm going to go with one of these different accrediting organizations to oversee my lab function. They're the most common ones that we work with here at Lighthouse are Joint Commission, CAP, and COLA. It does cost a little bit more to have a certificate of accreditation, but the services that you get are really, really good. It is worth it. We do accreditate a lot of labs with COLA. They're very easy to work with. And I would say if you were a first-time lab, COLA or CLIA are probably the easiest to work with as far as like getting set up and going through the initial inspection and regulatory process. So those are the different kinds of lab, or those are the different kinds of certificates for the labs that you can obtain when you're filling out this form.
Well, thanks for sharing some of that insight, especially on some of the more efficient pathways for a first timer here. With that, we're going to go ahead and turn over to section 3, the type of laboratory.
Okay, here in section 3, this one is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to go through and you are going to check that the type of lab that you are. The most common laboratories that we see through Lighthouse are either hospital labs, independent laboratories, physician office labs, or practitioner other. So you would just go through and you would make your determination as to what laboratory category your lab specifically falls under. And then you would just check that box. And if you have any questions about that, again, Lighthouse is here to help support you in determining where your lab fits.
Yeah, absolutely. Really straightforward in that section. But like Dr. Bell says, if there's anything that you feel like we might have glossed over here today or that you need clarification on, please follow up with us. There's multiple ways to do that, either through our YouTube channel, email us at info@lighthouselabservices.com, or reach out to us on social media. We're available everywhere. Let's go ahead and jump to section 4 now, hours of laboratory testing.
Okay. Here in hours of laboratory testing, you are going to want to list the actual hours that patient testing is performed. This is important because this lets CLIA know when somebody is going to be physically available on site. That's important because CLIA will use the hours of laboratory testing to either perform surprise inspections or to perform a scheduled initial inspection. There may be other times where you have testing personnel that are on site, maybe, getting the lab up and going for the day, but not actually testing. You want to make sure here that you're listing specifically those testing hours. There is a box there at the top. If you are like a hospital laboratory and you are testing 24/7, you would just check that box. The other thing I do want to mention is that there are laboratories that have a shared laboratory space, maybe two different CLIA numbers. You want to make sure if you are listing out the hours for your specific CLIA number, you want to make sure that those hours don't overlap with the other CLIA ID number. That can cause confusion, especially when inspectors are trying to schedule and they're trying to come on site. So it's very, you want to make sure that you're very clear about the hours of testing. You'll fill it out Sunday through Saturday. If you're not open, you would just make a note on days that you are not open. If you are a part-time laboratory, you want to make sure that you indicate that on here as well.
Okay. And now jumping over to section 5, this won't pertain to everyone, but what are some of the considerations folks should have in mind if they are potentially looking at multiple sites?
So if you're looking at multiple sites, you're going to want to fill this section out. So you would fill out, yes, will have multiple sites. This is usually for like long-term care facilities that have places where they may process specimens and pick them up. So you're going to want to take into account all of the facilities that you will fit under this umbrella. If you have a mobile unit, you're going to want to list that, temporary testing sites, that sort of thing. This section is not common for most startup laboratories. I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen. We do have labs out there that do. And then you're going to want to list on here how many sites that you have that will fall under this CLIA certificate, and what you're performing at those sites. So it may be different depending on what you have at each location. You just want to make sure that you're accounting for all of those different areas of testing. Okay, so here in section 6, we are talking about wave testing. This is going to be any of that testing that falls under that certificate of waiver that we covered earlier. You are going to list the analyte test, the test name, and the manufacturer. Good examples here are your rapid flus, your rapid strep testing. You would put on there what the test name is and who manufactures your kit. You're also going to want to make sure that you write down your estimated total volume down there at the bottom. This is important. I will say for your volume to estimate, if you don't have a clear picture of how many tests that you are actually going to be testing, you're going to want to estimate a little bit low because your CLIA fees are based on your test volumes. If you're not doing any wave testing, you would just click the box down there that says check if no wave tests are performed. If you need more room, it is acceptable to list those tests on another sheet and attach it to your CMS-116.
Okay. And then what are the considerations that we should be looking at with Section 7 PPM testing?
So section 7, again, this is for those provider offices that are testing in their physical locations. They're looking through the microscope at different patient tests that they're trying to use for diagnosis. So if you are falling under that PPM category, you are going to want to check off what test you're actually doing. You'll see that there are several different ones that are listed. You will see this in dermatology offices, maybe OBGYN offices. They're going to want to go through and they're going to want to check off every test that they're doing so that they can let CLIA know these are the specialties that we're performing. Again, you're going to want to write down that estimated test volume. If you know it, great, list it. And if not, estimate, like we always say, just a little bit low so that your CLIA fees are reflective of that. If you're not doing any PPM testing, you would check the box there that says no PPM tests are performed. If you do need additional space, you would do the same thing. You would add it on another piece of paper and you would attach it to the CMS-116.
Okay. And now we'll flip the page to Section 8, covering non-waived testing.
Okay, Section 8, Non-Waived testing. So these are going to be for those certificates of compliance and certificates of accreditation. You're going to want to fill out this section. These are going to be your moderate complexity or your high complexity tests. You're going to know what type of tests that you are doing based on the IFU that comes with the test. If it's an FDA approved test, those usually fall under the moderate complexity categories. If you're unsure, you can contact Lighthouse to help us so that we can help you categorize your tests. There is a website on CMS where you can also look up the manufacturer of your test to see what category those fall under. Your high complexity tests also need to be listed here. You're going to want to list out the name of each test, the analyte that you're testing for, who manufactures that, and then you do want to indicate whether that is moderate or high complexity. And the reason for this is when CLIA looks at this form, they're going to want to make sure that your testing personnel and your laboratory director meet the criteria for being able to perform those tests or oversee those tests. There's not a lot of room on this box right here to fill in your tests. You probably will want to add those on another piece of paper. And again, you'll attach it to this form when you submit it. But you do want to make sure that you're listing everything that you are testing. If you need additional space, make sure that you check the box there so that they know that you're adding subsequent pieces of paper that go with this. Once you get your tests filled out, you're going to want to go down below and you are going to see that there is a specialty or a subspecialty for every different type of testing. You're going to want to indicate what your tests fall under. One of the things that you will not see on here is you do not see any molecular testing, but molecular typically falls under those microbiology categories. So you would test, if you're testing for a specific pathogen, you would say that it was, bacteriology, and you would list the amount of tests that you think you're going to be performing. You may be doing a genetic testing that would fall under clinical side of genetics. Toxicology testing that may fall under your toxicology or your chemistries, depending on what type of test and what instrument you're using to do those test categories on. You just want to make sure that you are checking your categories and putting in your test volumes. And then you're going to add those test volumes up and you're going to put the total down there in the far bottom right hand corner. And again, if you're unsure, we do say do your best estimate a little bit low because your fees are based on that. If you estimate high and you are not hitting that target value, CLIA will not give you a refund for those tests that you didn't do. It's better to estimate low, and then if you go over, you just have to pay the difference in the fees. It works a lot better that way because you just pay a difference rather than overpaying and not getting any of that money back.
Well, thanks for walking us through that section specifically and then offering that additional insight there about the testing volumes. We're going to go ahead and turn the page and talk about section 9 type of control here.
Okay. So section 9, you're going to list the type of laboratory ownership that you have. Hospitals, you will tend to see them fall under, religious affiliation or not for profit. So you would check one of those boxes. Independent laboratories, a lot of times those are for profit. So you may check in that box proprietary, or there's others that may fall under like government, city. So you just want to check the box that best fits your laboratory and their financial situation.
Okay. And then finally, looking at section 10, what are the considerations that you go along with lab director affiliation with other laboratories?
Yes, so this is important. You want to list other laboratories that your laboratory director oversees. There is a regulation in place that states that a lab director can only oversee 5 laboratories at a time. And so CLIA is really making sure that lab directors stick to the amount of labs that they are regulated to oversee. And there are some states that I will mention that have more stringent requirements, and they can only see like 2 to 3 laboratories. So depending on what state you're in, also kind of dictates how many laboratories a lab director can oversee. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to list any of the laboratories your laboratory director is associated with. You're going to want to list their CLIA number, and then you're going to want to list the name of those laboratories as well. So you'll fill that out, and that lets CLIA know that you do have a lab director. They are affiliated with other laboratories, and then CLIA is going to make sure that they fit the requirements for overseeing the lab that you are applying for.
Okay, and then finally, we've gotten through all 10 sections here, and we're on to the signatures. What should you be looking for here before you sign? Final reviews, checks, and of course, there's some supporting information on the back of this document as well. So just take us through these final steps here.
So once you've gotten everything filled out, you do want to have your laboratory director or the owner of the laboratory sign this form. We recommend that you do have the laboratory director sign the form, stating that they are aware that their name is being put on this form to apply for this CLIA license. We have seen in the past where laboratory directors were not aware that they were being basically volunteered to take on laboratories. So it's important that they sign it and that they are aware. If they are both the owner and the director, you could have them sign in both places. If only the owner is available, it is okay for them to sign. CLIA may come back and ask for an attestation from the director that you have listed, saying that they do approve of this application and that they are okay with taking um, the regulatory oversight for this laboratory. So we have seen that in the past. So if you can, we do say it's best to have the laboratory director sign and date this. Um, Once this is completed, I would just go back through, make sure that you have filled out every section that is pertinent to your laboratory and the type of certificate that you are applying for. You're going to want to attach all those extra test pages that you might have listed out, and you're going to want to attach all of your laboratory director's credentials because CLIA will review all of those. They want to make sure that your laboratory director meets the regulatory requirements. And then you are going to submit this. It usually takes about 30 to 45 days to hear back from CLIA. They will email the person that you listed above in that section 1 with any updates, or if they need more information, maybe something was not clear, they're going to reach out to that person and ask for clarifying or additional information. So it is important, again, that whoever you're listing in that section 1 above, that they are monitoring their email and that they're responsive and can communicate with all the parties involved in case you do have to submit additional information.
All right. Well, thank you again, Dr. Bell. Really great walkthrough here today. Lots of things to consider, especially if you're filling these forms out for the first time. But again, we do assist with this process here at Lighthouse Lab Services. So please, if you need assistance with filling out your CLIA application form, hiring a lab director, or stacking your lab, or really any other aspect of lab management or quality oversight, please feel free to reach out to us.